Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. Really exciting topic, looking at the ways that you can innovate with plant protein in active nutrition. And a really important point of the title is the whole concept of changing the way you innovate, because I think plant protein is very much at a crossroads and opportunities. And that's a very important part of the title for me, which is just to reflect on absolutely the opportunity that is there for plant-based protein, but it is at a crossroads in which we have to reflect and appreciate that there are some things that we do definitely need to improve if we're going to truly maximize the opportunity. So I would like to take you through that this morning in terms of some of the data that we work with at Nutrition Integrated, and we're going to do that through the lens of plant-based protein powders. Now, as a point to start, I think this nicely frames it. Plant is definitely a macro trend influencing all nutrition categories, specifically sports and active nutrition. And I think the visual here is a really good one. It's actually taken from the brand Cos, which is a hugely successful one in the US. And it's definitely suggestive of the future is where nature powers our nutrition. Now, if plant is a macro trend, which I think we would all agree, it's also a trend because we see it as a conduit to more active and mainstream consumers. And I think that is absolutely to do with the sentiment that plant is perceived to be healthier. Now, the premise of the opportunity is, of course, based on that, but it does actually mean we have to connect with flexitarianism, or those consumers who adopt the flexitarian approach to their nutrition and their diet, as opposed to just vegans who remain a relatively small or niche group. So if we're going to connect with people who are maneuvering in and out of a plant-based diet throughout the week, then we have to make sure that all of our products are good enough. Now, and I suppose that lends itself to this reflection point as we move into the data. That's just to say, so what is plant doing at the moment? Is it truly influencing active nutrition, and is it matching expectations? And I think that's the key benchmark that we need to set for this in order to decide what is the best way to innovate and, of course, change the way that we innovate. So that is the starting point. Now, to set this off, there's no doubt that if everyone is looking to be healthier, there's a macro trend for more consumers to want to adopt better habits towards exercise and nutrition, then protein is very much at the mainstream. What you have here is two charts, one on the left for the UK, one on the right, which is the US. The yellow line is Google search term for protein, which you can see is year on year increasing. And what you can actually see is in the blue a comparison to the word diet. Now, diet is just a surrogate for people possibly looking for simple, quick fix solutions, possibly seen as a more negative approach to the way that they adopt nutrition behaviors and habits. And what we can see is that is more on the decline, which I guess maybe inherently we feel comfortable with, because it would be suggestive of people being more positive overall in looking for positive habits and behaviors. I guess in that, therefore, with protein on the up, what we can say is that I think protein is very much seen as a surrogate for being healthier, and that consumers are increasingly understanding and recognizing that the benefits of protein are vast, and that they absolutely still want to know more. So it's perfect. We want to go and have a healthier population, and protein is very much at the forefront of that. Now, in terms of plant-based protein, brands, in terms of people who have already made their move. So in terms of looking at traditional sort of sports and active brands, on the left, My Protein, part of the Hut Group, one of the biggest there is, they have launched this pure plant protein. It's kind of recognizable of their pro range, but they have a huge range dedicated to plant and vegan based products. I think if I replace the Hut Group with other major brands like Opto Nutrition or ESN Germany, Foodspring, etc., then they're all having plant-based protein powders. Now, on the right, you've got a brand called Form, which is a UK-based brand. They're a democratized, active brand that have emerged, and I think is very much relevant and reflective of the industry today in terms of brands looking to build up on a plant-based DNA within their brand proposition. And what they're doing is showcasing that plant protein is at the forefront of their products. And in fact, in this instance, they have 3 different powders available. So brands have already made their move. And I suppose that's reflective of the fact that there is a lot of products available. And if I was actually to show this data, this is just giving you an understanding of the total number of plant-based protein powders in Europe. We've separated UK from Europe just because it's a huge market, sort of a billion euros worth of revenue based on Euromonitor figures. And what you can actually see here is if you take all of the protein powders available in the UK and Europe, then what you can see is whey is the most dominant source available. Effectively, it's in 52% of all protein powders in the UK and 59% of the rest of Europe. But if we drop down, you can see that plant protein, in this instance, indicative of pea, rice, hemp, fava bean, sunflower, and so on and so forth, is in 31% of all protein powders in the UK and 23% in Europe. Now, we've separated soy out from the rest of the other plant because I think people tend to see soy slightly differently. It's a huge legacy within the market. But people, when they talk about a plant-based trend, tend to be talking about a lot of things other than soy, rightly or wrongly. Of course, if you put plant and soy together on this chart, you would demonstrate that there are a significant number of products available already that have plant-based protein in. Now, what this chart does is it provides just the use of plant protein in protein powders, but what it's not talking to you about is the products that reach the end consumer. So what I showed on the previous slide is products that are effectively propositioning themselves to the consumer as plant-based. Now, if we were to put this slide on, this is the plant protein category as the consumer would see it in store or online. And effectively, we've made the comparison versus whey protein. So effectively, if you took all of the products available, what we can see here is that in the UK, 32% of whey, protein powders are whey. So that would be like we are a whey protein powder, whey protein concentrate or isolate, or maybe a blend. It's slightly higher in Europe, actually nearer 47%, which is why we keep the UK separate, representing it's got a greater over-index of plant-based protein sources. Now, you've also got meal replacement, so that would be akin to things like Huel or Y Food in Germany or Jimmy Joy in Holland, for example, maybe Feed in France. What you've got is the sort of meal replacement, and what you can see here is that 9% of those in the UK are solely plant-based, but in fact 7% still use a plant-based protein source in combination with dairy. And that is a viable protein category for plant-based protein. Now, the big thing here is you've got a plant single source, which is just simply saying this is a pea protein or a rice protein, and that's all that is in the product. And then you have the multi-source products, which are the blends, to which there's about equal amount of both product categories. Now, we make that distinction because they have different nutritional characteristics. They also have different flavor characteristics, and they tend to present themselves slightly different in the market. The single source protein powders are used as adjunct to your diet, maybe added to smoothies, etc., or showing versatility. Maybe they get added in typically unflavored for the most part. And then the multi-source are the big brand propositions, a little bit like the ones we showed you on the previous slide, which present themselves as having a multitude of benefits to muscle, health, immunity, and so on. And I suppose if you were to add up both the single source and the multi-source, then actually the frequency of available of products is greater for plant-based than just whey. Now, there are, of course, other protein powders in the market, but it's basically showing you that there is a significant amount of availability of plant-based protein. So it is a macro trend. We have an appreciation that the opportunity is significant, and I think we would agree with that. Brands have made it or made products available. So I guess the question is, how well do they perform? Because if they're available and doing great, what therefore is further opportunity? Now, if we were to move on, I think what we're showing here is actually the products that have been launched and the products that were also delisted throughout the year of 2023. Excuse me. Now, if there is a net gain in products, then you could get the sense that people are still accelerating their plant-based innovation. Whereas if there is a net loss in the number of products in the market, you could argue that maybe they're just pausing innovation whilst they're reflecting on the potential success of the products available. Now, using the same categories that were on the previous slide, what we can see here, and it's highlighted, hopefully you can see my cursor, but the plant multi-source in the UK has gone from 104 products that were available on the 1st of January 23 down to 95 products at the 1st of January 2024. Now, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a massive decrease. And you can see the plant single source 83 to 77, and the same numbers but much bigger in Europe. There's shown a slight decrease on both sides. I guess the single source marginal 200 to 199. What does that tell you? Well, effectively, the number of products that have been launched versus what has been delisted has not been outstripping the latter. So the number of products or plant-based protein products is still in the market, hugely available, but they're not increasing. Now, if you put that into context where people are innovating, there's marginal increases in the clear-based products. Whey is actually slightly decreased as well in terms of as a category share. But what you're seeing is, from a plant-based point of view, we're not accelerating. So it is a macro trend. It's highly available. We love the opportunity. And apparently we're connecting and resonating with consumers that it is a healthier proposition. And I think they believe in that. But at the same time, we're not now increasing the number of products in the market. And we have to ask the question, why? So I think the products that are launching are more about renovation and they are innovation, because to some extent, for every product that launches, there is a product that is coming out. And that is a really important part of this category that we have to be generally appreciative of in terms of thinking about our innovation dynamics. So if we then look at some of the commercial opportunities, or certainly some of the commercial indicators of performance, this is Amazon, where we're looking at Amazon in the UK only, but the same trend is reflective actually in Germany and a few other Amazon markets too, where whey outperforms plant protein. And I guess the sentiment here in terms of what I've said is that consumers like the idea of plant protein. They absolutely do. But beyond what we describe as the militant vegan, i.e. those that are a core consumer of protein and they are solely vegan, to which they have no other choice of product to consume if they want protein, the product experience does not overarchingly match expectation, i.e. it's just possibly not nice enough, or some attributes of the product are not working for them sufficient that they're not buying them. So in this instance, whey is outstripping plant-based 5 to 6 times in terms of sales on a monthly basis. And in fact, whey is remarkably resilient. Now, there's been some peaks and troughs along the way, and that can be to do with general commercial volatility, pricing, and so on. But in general, staying at sort of early stages of 2024, whey continues to outstrip the performance of plant protein, despite there being almost as many plant-based protein powders available as there are whey-based. So we have to ask the question, why would that be? Now, if we strip this down into the different categories, so the two blue lines here, or the blue and the turquoise, reflect whey protein concentrate, whey blend. Their grey line here with a slight peak is WPI, whey protein isolate. And then this dark blue line here is the plant multi, the one probably we care about the most. I would just say that actually that does outperform WPI on Amazon in terms of some of the indicative performance that we see. So it's not that plant protein is not performing. It does. It just hasn't continued to grow over a period of time. So again, it's available. It's got commercial returns. It's definitely added value to a lot of brands who didn't sell to vegan militant consumers previously. But for the last 6, 12, 18 months, arguably, then the growth of plant-based protein powders has probably not matched the industry perception of plant being a macro trend. So again, we need to ask the question why that is. And I suppose when we really think about it and we play this down, thinking about the plant loyalist, the flexi and the vegan, so 3 types of almost plant-based consumer, I guess the key point I want to flag here is that the plant loyalist is not entirely vegan, so they can opt out. The flexi is a very hard consumer to categorize, because that could be someone who on a scale of 1 to 10 thinks having a salad once a week as being a flexitarian, whereas 9 out of 10 as a flexitarianism is someone who almost is adopting as much flexitarian approach as they possibly can. And I think if a plant-based product to a flexitarian is not something that they are enjoying the consumption of, then they have an opt-out. And ultimately that, to some extent, reflects this. Now, if products are price accessible, which they are. So I've highlighted the price to the consumer for 1 kilogram worth of plant-based protein. Then you can see here that around 35 euros per kilo for plant protein multi, and at 22 euros per kilo for a single. There is some variation, of course. There's lots of reasons for that, added addition of actives and so on. But those prices are remarkably consistent with that of whey protein. So it is available and the price is accessible compared to whey to the consumer. So that is not a factor that is inhibiting the purchase intent. So that's really important to appreciate. Now, if we also look at the amount of protein that plant protein provides, then at the top you've got the multi-source and then the single source, and then whey at the bottom is our benchmark. Now, whey at 78% protein and 22 grams of protein per serve on average reflects according to sort of 20 versus the multi and 70%. So you could argue that the protein per 100 or the percentage of protein is inferior if in fact you're after a really true core consumer within sports nutrition. But in the grand scheme of things, 20 grams of protein on average, 70% protein is a pretty good product. So I would say that the impact of this is negligible, and is definitely not preventing someone from having a plant protein versus, or as a flexitarian, let's say. Now, I would also just point out that maybe one factor that is important to me as a commentator on this industry is if you look at whether they communicate their product as a vegan protein or a plant protein or maybe another name. So this is the naming convention of the product. So virtually what is it called? Then what you can see on the multi-source is that in the UK, 45% of brands still call their product a vegan plant protein powder. And in Europe, they still call it a vegan protein powder as well, 59%. And I think the fact that we are still using vegan a lot marginalizes the consumer in thinking about who this product is for. So I do think that is important to reflect. But if I was to summarize probably the biggest factor for me, it's actually this one, which is pea is the industry benchmark, and pea is a great protein source. And has done a great job within this industry and has improved to get better. It's 65% of all protein powders will include pea, and in fact that's the number one in UK and the rest of Europe. And what this chart also shows is that 17% in Europe also use pea and rice, and actually the dot for pea is all the way along here, which reflects it is such a dominant protein source that the products themselves are rather homogeneous in the protein blend that they use and therefore the flavor profile it provides. And I think to some extent, whilst pea and these products have improved in taste, there's still a large amount of work that needs to be done in terms of truly matching the product expectation of consumers. And I suppose therein lies the opportunity for plant-based protein. The key to success for all brands is, of course, to have a great tasting product, because at the moment plant proteins are available, but they don't perform to the extent that whey protein does. The amount of protein that they have available is absolutely fine. I think they could absolutely call themselves more plant-based than vegan, and they're definitely price accessible. But the key thing when you take all of these factors in is that taste is at the heart of this. Products still have a long way to go in order to resonate with consumers. And I think the key thing here is not to have the mindset that how is a plant-based protein the best plant-based protein out there. It's to try and as far as possible benchmark versus dairy, because ultimately that is what consumers still love in terms of the taste profile within our industry. So that is the opportunity, and hopefully that gives you an appreciation of how we need to change the way that you innovate with plant protein and active nutrition. And that is why that the opportunity is still there, absolutely, but we're at a crossroads in order to focus our innovation so that we can continue to make products taste great. Now, with that, I'm going to hand over my time and the baton over to Bart, who's going to give you an overview of Cosun and the opportunities that they offer.
Yes, thank you, Nick, and hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bart Pennings. I'm a sales manager at Cosun Protein. Cosun Protein is the company that developed an innovative process to extract protein from fava beans. And in the next 10 minutes, I will show you why this new food ingredient has so much potential in active nutrition. But let's first start with the fava bean itself, also known as broad bean, and from the same plant family as peas. Fava bean is one of the first plants to be cultivated and consumed by humans. And however, the fava bean acreage in Europe diminished after the trade agreement between America and Europe in the early 90s. And Europe started importing vast amounts of soy protein. But luckily, there's a renewed interest in fava bean because of its limited environmental impact and favorable protein characteristics. I'm going to tell you all about it. Starting with limited environmental impact of fava bean as a plant protein crop. This is shown here in the graphs by Niso Food Research. And you really see how fava bean has the lowest land use, water use, and CO2 emission per kg of protein. In addition, fava bean is also a nitrogen fixating crop, so it really helps with the soil health, and it also can be grown locally in Europe and North America. Fava bean protein as a food ingredient is used more and more in various categories, as shown here in this graph by Mintel. You see that in brown, for example, fava bean protein used in meat substitutes. In the different shades of green, fava bean protein used in various plant-based alternatives to dairy. And also it's becoming more and more popular in active nutrition, drinks and bars, as well as categories like cheese and baked goods. So already being used, but I think the future looks very bright and much more new product development ongoing with fava bean protein. Of course, we play a role there. I want to play a big role going forward. And as I mentioned in the introduction, at Cosun Protein, we have developed a process to extract fava bean, to extract protein from the fava bean, resulting in fava bean protein isolate with a high protein content, with excellent solubility and functional properties, and very interestingly and important, a very clean taste. We named this fava bean protein isolate Tendra. That's the brand name. And in this slide, you can see the very clean taste of Tendra shown in a spider plot graph, benchmarking Tendra against other plant proteins like pea, canola, chickpea, or competitor fava product. And if you look at the yellow and gray lines, you can clearly see that Tendra is perceived by consumers as much less bitter and beany than these other plant proteins. So that's a very important aspect of the Tendra clean taste, and which is important as referred to by Nick. Another relevant aspect of Tendra is the solubility. And here we compared mixed solutions of Tendra and other plant proteins, and we use centrifugation as a model to show how well Tendra remains in solution, but also how poorly the others remain in solution. And you see at the other proteins sedimentation occurring, and this is of course not desirable, especially if you're formulating with plant protein in a beverage or ready to mix product. You want the protein to stay in solution, because sedimentation also can result in a gritty mouthfeel and in a less creamy mouthfeel. And again, that's not desired. Moving forward, another relevant aspect of Tendra is its low viscosity at higher concentrations. On the right side, you see a video where we made solution of different plant proteins, heated, and then you see after heating with the Tendra, even at 10% concentration, really remains low viscous. And this is also shown on the graph on the left side in blue before heating, and in orange the squares after heating. Only at 15% or higher there is some viscosity appearing with Tendra. This is of course very relevant for many food applications, but also in the active nutrition beverages, ready to mix, ready to drink. Because of this low viscosity of Tendra, you can really achieve high concentrations and remaining a smooth and non-gritty, creamy mouthfeel. Very important. At Cosun Protein, we have also an application team that develops recipes, example recipes, and can help you with your formulations. Here is an example of a ready-to-mix protein shake with Tendra. And what's interesting to mention is customers really praise Tendra here for helping them achieve a smooth and creamy mouthfeel without the use of dairy protein. Another example here is of a ready-to-drink product with Tendra inside. And here customers value Tendra because it allows them to achieve very high protein levels, even up to 40 grams per serving, without compromising taste and texture. If you're interested in more application recipes, you can find them on our website, cosunprotein.com, or feel free to reach out to me. Well, in conclusion, we believe Tendra fava bean protein isolate is a winning ingredient in active nutrition and can really help formulators to get to that level of the dairy products, as Nick mentioned. So our three flexes, as we call them, of Tendra is the unbeatable taste, the unrivaled solubility, and the unparalleled viscosity. So thank you for your attention, and Nick and I would gladly answer your questions in the Q&A. Thanks.